Leave you to it. Good evening. Hopefully microphone working. I thought Jeff Stelling was coming for a minute, but you're stuck with me. Great to have you all here to preview the World Cup. We're live on soccerbase.com, so mind your language, but I do recommend you get a seat if you can. Just before I introduce our guests, if you want to take a seat, if possible. Well played. Okay. Okay, is everybody ready? Please welcome our first panelist. Now, this is a man who is the brains behind Opta Joe on Twitter, which I'm sure all of you follow, which is 5 years old, would you believe, today. He'll be giving us all the stats and everything we'll need to know ahead of the World Cup. Please welcome Duncan Alexander, first up. Next, a man who played for England 79 times. He played in 2 World Cups representing England, of course, in 86 and 1990, and he scored that goal at the Maracanã, the one and only John Barnes. Now, this is what Bruce Millington was referring to, and this is the Bible for the next few weeks. It is magnificent. We're coming here alone to see this before anybody else in the country. We need to congratulate him and welcome him because he edited it, and in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of yours as well, he is the best judge in football. Mark Langdon. Right, the plan. Until probably 7:30, we'll talk to the boys here and preview the World Cup and hopefully find a few winners. After that, it's over to you. I want your questions for 10, 15 minutes before the game kicks off at 8. So think about your questions for the panel. We will come to you later. But for the meantime, let's crack on and talk football. John Barnes, talk World Cup and talk England first. If you were Roy Hodgson and I said to you, you can have a place in the last 16, but go out there, would you take it?
Go out in the last 16? No. Can you hear me? Is this on? Or is this just for show? Because I think if you look at the way the group will fall, the last 16 falls quite favourable, which means that we should be the favourites to go to the last 8. Going through the group is more difficult than going to the quarterfinals in a perverse way, because the group is more difficult. If you look at the way the groups actually lie, we'll then play either the first or second in the, I think it's Greece's group. I'm not 100% certain, but it's one of the groups which we should be able to beat that team. So getting through would probably be more difficult than going there. But so if you're saying to me that you're going to say to Roy Hodgson, you're getting to the last 16, he should then say we should get to the quarterfinals.
Do you think we'll get out the group?
That's more difficult. However, I think that the Italy game is a mustn't-lose game, because I think with us playing Costa Rica last, if we can not lose against Italy, that would give us a great chance, because Uruguay played Italy in the last game. And then if we beat Costa Rica, we go through, which I expect us to do. Yeah, I think we can go out of the group. I think Italy aren't the team they were. We are a young side with not much experience, so therefore I don't think that we have the right balance, because what most teams have, and always have had, the majority of players are players aged between 23 and 30 with good experience. We don't have that. We've got players over 30, players under 22, and the players between 23 and 29, the Lallanas and the Cahills, they're that age, but they haven't got that much experience because we've kept with the old guard for such a long time. So this really, and we say this every year, transitional period, but for me, this really is it. Because in 2 years, this squad with the Sterlings and the Lallanas and the Shaws and Barclays, in 2 years' time, they'll have 2 years more experience with the quality they have now. Means that in the Euros in 2 years' time, the World Cup in 4 years' time, we'll be much stronger.
Have we said this a million times before, though, with England?
Well, to be honest with you,
it's never happened.
I haven't, because in the last 10 years, that is why we have so many players. Forget about the players who are still there now, the Gerrards and the Lampards, but the players who've lost their place in the last year. There have been so many England players with over 80 caps, because we really kept this team for such a long time. Now, all of a sudden, this is really a time where we're changing them, but these good young players have only had 1 year's football experience, never mind international experience. So then to put that pressure on them to say, you're going to win us the World Cup or do it, I don't want to do that. Yes, they can, but I'm not going to put any pressure on them. And I am one who is if we get knocked out in the group, I'm not even bothered, because I know that this young side will, if we stay with them and we don't be overly critical of them, they can be a good side in the future. Theo Walcott went to the World Cup at 16 when I don't think he should have. So much pressure was put on him. He's now showing his potential 8 years later. So I don't want to do that to these young players.
Mark, with your betting head on, what are you expecting from England? What are you backing England to do?
Initially, I wanted to be against them when they were 6-4 to get out of the group. I thought that was to not get out of the group. I thought that was a very big price. But the more I look at Uruguay, the more confident I am that England can progress, because outside of Suarez and Cavani, I don't think there's that much to like about Uruguay. I'm not sure that South America will be such a massive advantage to a team like Uruguay. Yes, they won the World Cup the last time it was in Brazil, but that was 1950. I think we can put a line through that piece of form. I don't think there's that much really. They've got Godin at the back, but you look at somebody like Lugano, who was at West Brom. I mean, he was absolutely useless. So I think England have got a chance of definitely beating them, get the draw in Manaus against Italy, and then I think that they can move on from there and beat Uruguay.
Do you not worry, though, with players like Lugano, who's being battered left, right and centre, that he's just the type of player, and you see it a million times, who's useless domestically? And this is something that Jamie Carragher talks that did his head in international football, because you play against players who are useless, and then you play against them and they're playing for their country, and they suddenly look like Maradona all of a sudden. Do you not worry about someone like him, Gaston Ramirez, others for Uruguay, who suddenly are different players?
I do think that when they play for particularly Uruguay, because they're a team that's sort of grown together, and also they like being underdogs, yeah, there is a sort of a patriotism that's not really there with England. I would think that's fair to say. But I still don't think you can look at somebody like Lugano and think that he's at the top of his game. I think this Uruguay team peaked about 3 years ago when they won the Copa America. 3 years on now, I just don't see them getting the ball to Suarez and Cavani. It's all right having them two up front, but how do you get the ball to them?
The one thing I'd say about that is that a lot of these players are much more comfortable playing for their country than their club. So even though they're in the Premier League not doing well, look at Gary Medel, played for Cardiff. Have you seen him play? How bad is he? Did you see him at Wembley? For Chile. They beat England 2-0. They beat England 2-0 because he's comfortable playing for Chile. Coates, you see for Liverpool, he can't even get in Liverpool's reserve. But for Uruguay, he does well because of the way they play. So I never look at particularly the South American players, the way they play in this country, and say, look at them playing for their clubs, they're no good, so they're not going to do it. Chile came to Wembley and beat England 2-0. Colombia went to Belgium and beat Belgium 2-0 in Belgium, and it's supposed to be a good side. So because we don't know much about these South American players, and we may feel they don't suit this English football, out there it's going to be very difficult. So the South American teams have improved immensely, and the European teams aren't as good as they were.
Just to ask you about the World Cup generally, John and Duncan, I'm going to come to you on this in a minute, what the stats say about the different areas. What type of football, what is going to be required from teams to win a World Cup in Brazil?
Well, first of all, I just want to talk about the way England will play, and then we can look at anything else. Now, we saw the way they played against Peru, and that is necessary because there's no way you can go on. In England, we like a very fast pace, we like a fast tempo. You look at Liverpool, and in and out of possession, we close down. You cannot do that in the World Cup. You cannot do that in August in England, never mind August anywhere else, like Manaus or in Brazil. So therefore, we are at a disadvantage more than any other country, because although other European teams will be there, other European teams play a much slower game than we do, so which is more suited to that environment. So we now have to change the way we play. And we saw against Peru, the players are uncomfortable, the fans don't like it. That's why I say what England should do a year before the World Cup, and we're going to go, is play the way you're going to play in the World Cup, which means in friendly matches, 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago, we should have started to play a very slow game, because as much as it's not necessarily in England in the friendlies because the weather is okay, when you go to the World Cup, you can't all of a sudden change the way you play because you've practiced for 2 matches. And you can see that is not how Roy Hodgson wants to play, that's not how the players want to play. But physically, that's what you have to do. Spain and Italy, they play a slow game. So yes, the conditions will be hard for them, but it's easy for them to adapt because that's very natural for the way they play anyway. So it's really going to be difficult in terms of us now adapting to change the way we play. Now, that's why I lean towards the South American teams, not just because of the environment and the humidity and the heat, because they have improved immeasurably in terms of the way they actually play. Spain are still the best European team, but they won the Euros, won the World Cup, won the Euros. Do they have that desire, that hunger to go and do it again? Although for me, they still are the best team in Europe and possibly the world. Italy aren't the team they were. Germany are not the team they were. Even defensively, they're not particularly great. England are a young side. So of the European teams, who can we say? Spain for me still will be, but I can't see past the South American team.
What do the stats say? Are we right to think along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think conditions, everyone's talking about Qatar in 8 years' time, or potentially, and how the conditions are going to be so bad, but Qatar's so small, the conditions there are going to be the same for everyone, but in Brazil, they're going to be really varied, and that's going to affect. I mean, you look at a team like Italy, you look at a team like Germany, they play all their games, all their group games in the northeast, and that's where it's going to be really humid, really hot, and like John said, you're going to really struggle to, you're going to have to play at walking pace. There's a reason why a lot of the old World Cups were at walking pace. The only counter to that slightly is that obviously the last World Cup was in the winter in South Africa, and England didn't exactly run around like they were super refreshed in that one. So, but I mean, looking at England, I mean, historically, you know, stats-wise, it's strange. There's a stat that says that after Brazil, England are the most watched team in World Cup. So if you're in a random country, you know, Africa or Asia or somewhere, if an England game's on, that's the game everyone wants to see. And the stats don't really back that up because they never score. They're the lowest scoring team of any of the regular teams in World Cup history. They've drawn 10 games 0-0 more than anyone else. You know, the last time they scored 3 goals against Denmark in 2002. And then the time before that was Cameroon. You know, John was playing. So
this is just to fill you with hope, by the way.
Yeah, I don't want to, you know, any ultra patriots can come and attack me afterwards. But you know, the only thing that's different this time is obviously, you know, it is a young team. You know, Roy Hodgson looks like he might be trying to play, you know, in a way that's going to utilise young players. And I think impact substitutions are going to be really important in this World Cup. And obviously, you know, England have got Sterling, they've got Barkley. So, you know, they've got a chance.
I'll come back to you on Germany, which is a really interesting point where they're playing. But England, do you sense that change in mentality that Duncan refers to? And to bring it to tonight for a second, what do you want to see tonight later in the game we're going to watch against Ecuador?
Well, I think he's going to play a side. I think the Peru team is probably going to be closest to the team that plays against Italy. And of course, the next game will be as close as the Peru. I think tonight he's made a lot of changes to see whether, if things don't go well against Italy, who he can trust, who he can bring on. Milner playing right back. He's obviously not going to start at right back. He's not thinking about that. But he's thinking about, as he says, the impact players. Now, what you really want to do, rather than think about impact players to come on to win the game, is picking a team that's going to win the game without the impact players. But that goes to show that, are we really expecting England to, while we're looking at Barkley and Sterling and these players, I don't believe you should actually start with them because you could work against them in their youth. But he knows the quality they have to bring them on. So, it's a very important game, but as you know, he was saying here, the statistics don't lie. And why people love watching England is because of the expectations, because of how much we build the expectation of England up worldwide, not just in this country. And as much as we're saying that this is a great World Cup because we're going there with no expectations, you know what we're like. It's so weak. By next week, if we beat Ecuador 3-0 tonight, we're going to win the World Cup. Unfortunately, if we lose, we're going to lose the World Cup, but it's all good anyway. So come next week, it's going to ramp up, because when people say we don't expect anything much, then all of a sudden you see a player do something and go, oh, I think we're going to. Whereas my feelings won't change from 6 months ago to now, based on if they play well tonight or against Honduras, all of a sudden they're going to go, hang on. Like you said, he's all of a sudden getting excited because you can see Uruguay on good, and we have to just we have to realize that this is a very good, potentially a good England side, which can be destroyed if you put so much pressure on them and they don't play well. We can actually then say they're no good, and these young players may not, you know, show their true potential. So, you know, as I said, I think they can do well, but if they don't, I'm not going to be overly critical.
Who would you start up front against Italy?
I would start with, listen, and this whole nonsense about Rooney. Rooney has to be in the team. Rooney's still the most important player. Still the most, him and Steven Gerrard. And against Italy, I would start with Sturridge and Rooney behind him. Very much like, I look at Welbeck, who may not have done well for Man United, but when he plays for England, he does well for England. There's few players who do better, like we talk about the South American players, Medell, and we talk about Godin. Very few English players do better for England than they do for their clubs. Danny Welbeck is one. I don't even remember Sturridge's, another, Darius Vassell. You remember playing for, he did well for England and he didn't do well for Villa. Very few players do that. And Welbeck is one, and he knows that. The manager knows that. That's why he trusts Welbeck. You see when he plays for England. So Welbeck playing, Lallana playing, Gerrard and Henderson, Rooney behind Sturridge. That's what I would play. And I think that's what he's going to play.
And Sterling in there?
As a coming up.
Impact.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Right, Group D. Let's wrap up Group D. Mark, your best bets and fancies from Group D?
I think the best bet is Italy to win the group. I know John was saying he thinks they're on the downgrade. I still think that they're the best team in that group. Buffon and Pirlo still sort of dictate one in goal. So important to the defence, leads the team, you know, from that position in goal. Pirlo still just pulls the strings in midfield. They've got De Rossi in there as well. Balotelli is somebody I wouldn't rely on for 38 games in the Premier League season, but over 4 or 5, you know, a short World Cup period we saw in the European Championship was absolutely unplayable. I think that Italy are the strongest team in this group. I expect them to win it.
And England-Italy, the game itself, you with those who are saying it could be a 0-0?
Yeah. The stats on the 0-0, I think if you want to have a bet now, you should be backing no goal scorer now. I think it's a price that's only going to go one way. It will come in. The draw went off favourite 2 years ago. When England played Italy in the European Championship 2 years ago, the draw was the favourite. And I think the same thing will happen this time around. In Manaus, 2 European teams that would take a point from that game as well. I think it'll be quite a boring match. 0-0 is a very
It can't be
big
worse
one.
than England-Algeria. That is the worst
No,
game
no.
I have ever seen.
England-Algeria was bad because England was so bad on that night. I think that this time that England can play with more responsibility. I think they'll look to keep the ball a little bit better than they did against Algeria. And Italy are not, they're not stupid. They'll understand the point's a good result, and I can see that one just sort of petering out into a very low-scoring game.
Are Italy more entertaining than us?
Yeah, probably. What I'd say is if England haven't scored by half-time, give up. I mean, 14 of their last 19 World Cup goals have come in the first half. Remember Sven used to say first half good, second half not so good. And he was right.
Anything else from Group D?
I mean, Costa Rica maybe got a chance of a shock. I mean, but I think...
Really?
Yeah.
Against who?
Against Uruguay, against England.
Oh, against England.
But I think, they're going to be used to conditions as well. I think, as I said, conditions are going to be really key in games, and they're going to be more used to them than Italy and England.
Final word on the group, John. Italy to win it, England to...
No, I think Uruguay will go through. So therefore, if we're going to go through, Italy will have to go out. Because, they're not the home team, but I think the South American teams, and as much as you said, Uruguay always play that way, and he's right when he talks about Uruguay not being a particularly strong side. And they rely on Cavani and Suarez, but they always have. They virtually play with 8 defenders who defend and fight and push and do all kinds. And then Suarez and Cavani score, or if they go to penalties, or however they get there, they get there. So they're not entertaining side at all. But as we saw in the last World Cup, when they got to the semi-finals, and as we saw in the South American Championship, they get the job done because they don't concede goals. They have hard-working players. And in those conditions, if you don't concede, and you got Suarez and Cavani, you've always got a chance of scoring a goal. Whereas, England will still look to attack. That's the thing. We will still look to attack because we haven't got any defensive players. Steve Gerrard is your only defensive midfield player. And is he a real defensive midfield player? So therefore, are we going to stop teams getting into the back four? That's the problem we have because the back four isn't as strong in the middle particularly as when we had Rio and John Terry. So if we're going to play a way where we get back and defend in front of them to protect them, yes, we cannot concede. But if we're going to play even in a slightly attacking game, is that defense good enough to keep Suarez and Cavani out? Probably not. So, and Italy, with the age that the Italians have, I still think ourselves in Uruguay will go through.
Okay, that's Group D. That's England. Group A, Mark, let's start with you. Is this straightforward as it looks for Brazil?
Yeah, I think the best bet here is to back Brazil to win all 3 matches. If you have a look back at the big host nations in recent times, France and Germany, they both started with three wins in their group stages. And I think that Brazil can do that. Particularly, they've got a really good start against Croatia because Mandzukic is suspended for that game. So Croatia will be missing their main goal threat. So I think Brazil will win that one. Then they take on Mexico. They beat Mexico in the Confederations Cup. Cameroon is the last game. It's in Brasilia, the capital. By then I'm expecting Brazil to have really got on a roll. It's not the most exciting Brazilian team that I've ever seen, but it's a team that's been put together very well by Scolari. Everybody knows their job. I think they may come unstuck later on against maybe one of a team with more quality in forward positions, but in the group stage, I think they'll be way too good for the rivals.
Could you argue that defensively, maybe not with the goalkeeper, but defensively it's one of the best Brazilian sides you've seen?
I think individually that they certainly are. You look at the players and you go, Alves is at Barcelona, Marcelo is at Real Madrid, Luiz is now a 40 or 50 million pound defender, and Thiago Silva is probably the best centre-back in the world. But both of those full-backs like to kick on. So does Luiz from his centre-back position. The goalkeeper plays in the MLS, so I'm not entirely sure about that. I just think that early on, I think that teams like Croatia and Mexico, the stage could be too big for them against Brazil in Brazil. So that's why I think it'll be a very comfortable start. The pressure will come on Brazil once we get into the knockout stages.
Describe what that pressure, John, is going to be like.
Well, it's going to be
Brazil
immense.
At home.
It's going to be immense. However, I think that there's a certain amount of pressure that you can come under, which means that you're under pressure. You're under so much pressure that it works against you and you lose, or you could be under even more pressure, which means that you cannot afford to lose. And I think that's the situation with Brazil. Because players have been under pressure before, and if you lose, yes, you're under a lot of pressure. But if you lose, does it really matter? Yes, it does. But are they going to burn your house down? No. They'll be under so much pressure that I don't think they can afford to lose. As far as Brazil go. Philippe Scolari will have them well disciplined. As much as we're talking about the old Brazilian way, good individual defenders, but lack of discipline, they'll go forward, they'll play the old Brazilian style. He won't. He won the World Cup because he's very pragmatic, and yeah, certain Brazilian managers are under pressure to take it back to the glory of 1970 when everybody attacked, or 1982 when he saw they were a fantastic side, but ill-disciplined at the back. But Brazilians love that type of flair, whereas Scolari will have the right balance. So he'll make sure that defensively they're strong, midfield players in front of them are strong, as when he had the boy Gilberto Silva from Arsenal, when people thought he shouldn't be playing, but he's strong defensively. He will still have that. So this Brazilian team will be very, very strong. I think Cameroon could pull up a shot. They drew 2-2 with Germany the other night. Mexico aren't the team they were, because Mexico in the CONCACAF group used to win that group very comfortably. Now they struggle to qualify out of that group. They have to qualify in the last games. Croatia, under those circumstances, in those conditions, we don't know. So it wouldn't surprise me if Cameroon pulls up an upset in this
So you
group.
think Cameroon is a good bet to get through?
For the price, and also on the price to get through, but I think that they could possibly pull an upset in this group because Mexico have had a horrible qualifying campaign. They're not a great side, as much as we know Mexico in the past. And Croatia, the conditions. So I think that, you know, if you had to go for an underdog to go through from the group, I'd go with Cameroon.
Does that make sense? Cameroon, they got a chance?
They look good against Germany the other night, and you know, if Etu can fire, then they've got a chance. I mean, the key stat with Brazil, I think, is that they've topped every group in the World Cup since 1982. You know, they're just the safest bet ever in the group stage. You know, they're going to obviously play well at home. They've reached the semi-final in 5 of the 7 World Cups that have been held in the Americas. You know, they're pretty much the only team that can go anywhere in the world and perform. And all right, they didn't win on home territory in 1950, but like Mark said earlier, 1950 is a long time ago. And I think the other thing as well is that, you know, football's become a lot more homogenous. You know, back in John's day, you know, you know, you'd play like an Eastern European team that the players were all, you know, mysterious, and there'd be South American teams with flair players that were tactically a bit odd. But now that, you know, the game's so global, I mean, 5 of Brazil's 7 midfielders play in the Premier League last season. So I mean, it's not like they're a mystery anymore. And I think, you know, the quality, and they're by far the best team in that group, and you know, the quality will out.
Is it right that they're favourites to win the whole thing with the bookmakers?
Well, I mean, that's home advantage is given that. I think most people are probably favouring, most people in the know are probably favouring Argentina. But I mean, Brazil are obviously, you know, a really strong bet.
Should they be favourites in your eyes, John?
Yes, and as I said, not necessarily because they are a great side, because they've had better Brazilian sides in the past. It's just that I don't think, from the European point of view, the European teams are as strong as they were. And from the South American perspective, yes, we talk about Chile and Colombia have improved immensely, but have they improved enough to be better than Brazil? No. Argentina are the ones for me who possibly could push Brazil, but with it being in Brazil, and of course I hate Argentina, then, you know, that obviously just makes me slightly favour Brazil. Not necessarily because I think they're a great side. Spain for me is still the best team in the world, but as I said, I will question their hunger because they've won. They have anything to prove. They've won the Euros and the World Cup again. So yeah, I think they're justifiably favourites.
What do you get asked about more, the goal at the Maracanã or the rap?
The rap. And that's easier to recreate.
Also, in all seriousness, what's it like to play in that iconic? It looks a bit different now. What's it like to
Well,
play
I
in
love
that
playing it
iconic
now
stadium?
because back then, I mean, you know, the history is the greatest thing about the Maracanã. You know, Pelé scored his 1,000th goal there. You know about the Maracanã Stadium, 200,000. 200,000 because everybody stood. Wembley is bigger than the Maracanã, but Wembley's all-seater. Everybody could stand in Wembley, could get more. So it was a bit run down, dilapidated. So it's more to do with the history than the fact that it was a nice stadium. The grass was long. So it's more to do with the history and the traditions, and you know, I love Pelé and I love Brazilian football, as we all do. So that was what made it special, rather than the stadium itself.
Final thoughts on Group A, Mark?
I definitely think that Brazil will qualify with 9 points. I think it's going to be very tight between Mexico and Croatia. Croatia have got a lot of good midfielders: Modric, Rakitic, Kovacic, Perisic. All ending H as well. They've got some. They've got some real talent in midfield. I just worry about them defensively. I know you're like Lovren at the back, but I'm not sure him and
Lovren will in a couple of weeks' time.
No, not when he's playing for Tottenham. But I think that
Liverpool,
you know,
Mark.
you get somebody like Chorluka next to him. He struggles usually, I think, at centre back. So I would worry about them from a defensive point of view. I just edge towards Mexico, but not very confidently.
So Group B, Spain, who John has described as still the best team on paper in the world. They're 8-11 to win Group B. Are they still the best team in the world, or are you with those who say they're on the decline now?
I think that there is a chance that they're on the decline, but I spoke to somebody the other day who just said, why not Spain? When I asked him who would win, he said, well, 10 straight clean sheets in the knockout stages of the competition. I worry about their midfield because I look at Xavi, Busquets and Iniesta, and it's the worst I've seen them play since pre-Guardiola. They just didn't play well this season at all. Now maybe that can benefit them and they'll be ready to go again for the World Cup. Xavi couldn't even get in the team for when they were playing out that decider to win La Liga. So I would worry about them from a point of view of actually winning it. You look back and think it's a long time since anybody did retain the World Cup as well. And I'm not sure Diego Costa is fully fit either. He's played a hard season for Atletico, so I would wonder where their goals will come from. Now they've won it before, without a striker. Torres nominally was sort of up front, but I just think that there are better teams than them this time around.
John?
Well, I don't necessarily think they're better teams because I still think they're a fantastic team, but they're teams with more hunger and more desire, which is also a quality you need to win football matches. I agree about the midfielder, they're strong at the back, so, there's going to there under those conditions, as much as they will keep the ball because that's what they do, these conditions are going to be harsh, but I expect them to go through and I expect them to be there or thereabouts. Interesting group because, of course, you've got Holland at 3-1, Chile at 4-1. I think Chile will go through.
I'll come back to you on Chile. Just on Spain, you talk about why would they not be hungry? Why would they not have that desire? Because if they were to win this, surely they're arguably the greatest team of all time if they're doing it again.
But they've won the Euro, they've won the World Cup, and they've won this, and they've won everything. What more do they have to prove? Even if they don't, they'll still go down in history as one of the greatest teams. And at the age of they're coming up to Xavi's 30, they're coming up, so I just don't think that they have them because they've never been a real side with full determination. They have to be playing well to win matches. They can't come back from behind. They can't get into a dogfight and win matches. And I just think that this probably is. Listen, they're the most likely European team to win. And if Argentina or Brazil don't win, I think Spain will. So I'm not saying they've got no chance, but I think that they're the best bet from a European perspective to win it.
I just look back. If you remember when France won in '98. They then crashed out in 2002. When Italy won it in 2006, they went straight out in 2010. Sometimes there is a tendency for the manager to stick by World Cup winners because they're very difficult to drop. And I personally wouldn't have Xavi in the team anymore because I'm not sure that he's better than Koke, for instance, at Atletico Madrid. But it's very difficult to drop a World Cup winner. And that would be my biggest concern. Has Del Bosque got enough about him to say, yes, you're a World Cup winner, yes, you've done this, yes, you've done that. But at the moment, Koke's in better form. I'm playing him. It's very difficult to do that.
What do the stats say about Spain? They 4 against them.
They say what you'd expect, really. They're very defensively solid. I mean, even in qualification, they were very low scoring. They were low scoring in the last World Cup. They won their 4 knockout games 1-0. It was pretty dour, really. 2008, they were really exciting. 2010, slightly less so. 2012, again. They're a bit reliant on Diego Costa performing, and he obviously had a really good season with Atletico. But how's he going to react to being booed in every game? Because Brazilian people aren't that keen on the fact that he played twice for Brazil and now plays for Spain. So
might not be fit either.
Yeah, he might not be fit as well. So they are, like John said, they're still a very good team. You could be foolish to write them off, but they're creaking a little bit, I'd say.
And as you say, John, this is one serious group. This.
Yes.
Where do you stand? You mentioned Holland and Chile.
Yes. I think it's unfortunate that Australia aren't the team that they used to be. Not to say that Australia could actually go through in the group, but when Australia was strong between 4 or 6 years ago, they could have been the kingmakers and maybe taken a point or beaten one of these 3 teams to really send the other team through. Whereas the Australia team are very much like the American team, the Mexican team. They're not as strong as they were, so I think they'll lose the 3 matches. And Holland, of course, now with Van Gaal being there, they'll also be very strong. But Holland always have problems, and we saw how strong Chile were. We saw them against Wembley. So it wouldn't surprise me if Spain and Holland obviously are the favourites to go through. But very similar to the other groups, it wouldn't surprise me if Chile causes an upset and goes through with Spain.
Agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I do. I think that Chile are a team that have got a lot of potential to... Slightly unfortunate that they're in this group, and then if they finish second, they've probably got Brazil in the last 16, because I think they were a team that everybody thought could be a dark horse to actually go a long, long way in this one. You look at Vidal and Alexis Sanchez, they've got 2...
Isn't Vidal going to be the key to this? He's had keyhole surgery on his knee, hasn't he?
It seems like he'll be fit, and I think he's arguably the best all-round midfielder in the world. If he's not the best, he's certainly up there as one the best, and they absolutely destroyed England at Wembley. They then went to Germany, lost 1-0, but again, Jogi Löw said afterwards that the best team lost. That would be my concern with them. Have they got enough goals in them? Because they create a lot of chances, will they take them? I still think at the prices, I'd rather be on Chile than Holland do. I think the loss of Strootman in midfield for them is absolutely massive.
Should we be proposing Holland?
Yeah, I think so. I think Van Gaal's decision to get himself a job before the World Cup started was inspired because his stock would sort of go through the floor after these 3 matches. Don't hold me to that when they win the World Cup.
Because you tipped them, didn't you, 4 years ago to get to the final with Spain? Why
I think
are you so against them this time around?
I think 4 years ago they had Sneijder was in the form of his life. They had a better defence. They had a more balance to their midfield. This is a very young Dutch team. Nearly all of their defenders are based locally in the Dutch league, and that's not one of the strongest in Europe. And even we've seen strikers come from the Eredivisie. They can score a lot of goals in Holland. Altidore would be one of those. At Sunderland, Josie couldn't hit a barn door. When he comes to the Premier League. So it's very defensively in Holland. The players are nowhere near the standard of some of the other leagues around Europe, and to be relying on Ron Vlaar as your sort of kingpin of that defence is asking for trouble.
So the 1-2...
Spain to win it and Chile to come second. Best bet in that group, I think, is Spain to win against Holland in the opening game. I think Spain could tire as the tournament goes on. I think they'll be okay at the start.
Anything else, Duncan, as we finish Group B?
Well, Chile actually considered the highest goals per game of any of the 32 teams in the World Cup. Also, Brazil didn't qualify, but any of the other qualifiers.
Isn't that they're one of the most attacking sides in the competition?
I would go look at their games, over 2.5 goals would be a good bet.
Now then, Group C. Mark, start with you on this one. Colombia were fashionable for a while to be tipped for this. Is the value gone?
I think it has, yeah. They were 300 to 1 at the start of the World Cup sort of qualifying campaign, and you're now taking 33 to 1, and Falcao's not there, so I wouldn't be backing them to win it now. I think they'll get out of this group okay, but I've gone off them in terms of the outright market. James Rodriguez is a very good player. They've got strikers that are scoring goals, but none of them are of the quality of Falcao. I think they will get out of the group, but this is a good opportunity for whoever comes through the England group, I think, here to, if you meet Colombia in the last 16, that's not a bad draw, really, when you consider...
That's what John was talking about earlier,
what some of the other teams have got, which is why I think Italy could go quite well, because they play a team from this group as well. So I think Colombia will go through, but you have a look at their defence. Pereira, one of their main centre-backs, he's out. Falcao, their main centre-forward, he's missing as well. They're missing a midfielder as well. So right through that spine of the team, they don't look as good as what they did, say, 18 months ago. So I think they'll get through, but I don't think that this is a team that can win the World Cup.
They're odds on to win this group, John, Colombia.
Well, you can see why, because of course it's Greece, Ivory Coast and Japan in there. So therefore, rightfully so, because are they still number 3 in the world? They were number 3 in the world.
Yeah, they certainly were.
So, they're in the top 5 in the world. So of course, in this group, they should go through. But they'll miss Falcao, and a couple of the other main players that they actually have, which really has gone against them, because I don't think they've got a really, really strong squad. I think their best 11 can be quite strong, but without 2 or 3 of their main players, I'm not going to say they'll struggle in the group particularly, but going much further than that, maybe getting to the quarterfinals, depending on who they play next, is a possibility. But Ivory Coast, with the players they have, this is their last hurrah, if you like, because Drogba's of a certain age, whereas the Touré is of a certain age. They're not going to be around for much longer, so this is their last chance. I felt sorry for them because I think in 2010 they probably had their best chance of even winning it, because they had but they were in a horrible group, with Holland and Brazil, and so therefore they didn't. But this is their last chance, so I expect Colombia and Ivory Coast to go through. But as far as Colombia is concerned, yeah, I think they could get to the quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals, really? Colombia, odds on. Should they be odds on in a group like this, Duncan?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, they should be. They're still a good team. They're defensively strong in qualifying. They had the most clean sheets in South America, 7. If you look at this group, Colombia have never got past the second round. Greece have got the second worst defeat ratio in the World Cup history. Ivory Coast have never got out of the group, and Japan have never got past the last 16. So, there's no real pedigree in there. And we've seen with Colombia before, they were massively tipped in 1994, and then it went wrong, badly wrong. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's a good opportunity for Group D to progress after this one.
Yeah, it's a good draw, as you say. We've done Group D. Group E, where France are odds on to win it. Switzerland, Ecuador and Honduras. 4 years ago, France were an absolute shambles. John, are you in the camp that sees them as a threat now, improving rapidly?
I don't see them as a threat in terms of winning it, because they're still, for some reason, will have disharmony for whatever reason, because France happen to be like that. It's a group that they should go through, because Switzerland, Honduras, 33-1, Ecuador in the South American Championships always do well, because they win all their home matches because they play so high up, and of course, depending on where they're playing, that could actually. But and we'll see them after tonight, and they have a better idea after tonight how good they can be. But I think France will win this group as they should. But getting through further down, I can see them getting to the quarterfinals possibly. But individually, they've got great players. If you look at the players they actually have, and you think very much like Portugal, they should do better than they do because of the players they have. But there always just seems to be some kind of disunity, disharmony, something upsets them, and they throw it away. Because player for player, they're as good as anyone else in the world. So yes, they'll go through the group, and could even get into the quarterfinals, but I don't see that get past the quarterfinals.
Do you trust France, Mark?
Not pass. No, I do actually. I think that Deschamps he's got rid of some of the troublemakers. I think Nasri was causing problems, and I think you need to be a very special player. If you're going to cause problems, you need to be very special to get into a squad like that. He's gone for a more balanced squad that maybe hasn't got as much quality, but I think he realises that it's more important to be able to get on and everybody get on together. I mean, I've seen the video of England at Italia 90, and it seemed like everybody got on there and they managed to get to the semi-finals. I wouldn't say that the team spirit will be the same and they'll be sort of betting and having a good laugh watching the racing all day, but I do think that they're
reading the Racing Post perhaps.
But I do think that I do think that they can go a long way in this competition. I look at the spine of that team, and Hugo Lloris is a fantastic goalkeeper. Varane has won the Champions League this season. The midfield, Matuidi, Pogba and Cabaye is very, very strong. It's very balanced as well. Up front you've got Benzema or Giroud, different options, a lot of variety to their attack. Ribéry is important to them, but if the back injury rules him out, I'm not massively concerned, because they've got some real pace on the wing, sort of ready to break through it in somebody like Griezmann, who's done really well for Sociedad this season. So I think they can go a long way. You have got to take on trust that everything will be okay, harmony-wise. But I think if you're looking for somebody sort of bigger than 20-1 to win the competition, I think France are the ones.
Just before we come back to this group, just pick you up on harmony and the squads that you're in. Is that one of the key factors at any World Cup, why it went wrong for England 4 years ago in Rustenburg, that you create that happiness, harmony in the camp? And Roy does seem to have picked good lads, if you like.
Well, yeah, because you're away for a long period of time, but I always say it doesn't matter, it's the World Cup, so the fact that you have to be away for a month or however long, 6 weeks, doesn't mean that you need to be entertained. You're there to do a job, to win the World Cup, to try and do what you can, to then not sacrifice a bit of boredom if that's what you're going to feel, because for whatever reason you're missing your wife or your dog, or you don't get a birthday cake or anything like that for success is wrong. So, but this is a modern feature anyway. So of course when we played we had Gaza, so Gaza kept everybody entertained. But you're there to do a job. So the whole idea of having to keep the players entertained, I think the biggest problem that England has, and a lot of European teams, is if you're taken out to your comfort zone, because we're mollycoddled. We want, perfection in the training pitch and the hotels and no noise and the perfect food. Now, if all of a sudden people are singing outside, or the water's a bit cold, or the pitch is, that gives us an excuse to lose. So I think we look for excuses to lose, or we give ourselves excuses to lose in terms of the hotel, in terms of, whereas if they put you in a B&B and the water's cold, you should still have that drive to say, we don't care, we're here to play football. So, and I think that that's probably worked against England, like you look at 4 years ago in Rustenburg, and we complain about whatever we have to complain about. So there are no excuses whatsoever. You're there to play football, and the harmony is important, but that harmony comes from the individual's perception of what he's actually there to do. He's not there to be entertained, and Roy Hodgson isn't there to keep you entertained and have to look for ways to make you excited. You're there to play football, get on with it.
In '86 though, when you were a bit pissed off that you weren't brought on until it was too late?
Not at all. I was watching Maradona, I couldn't believe it. On the same pitch as Maradona.
Just telling a story there in Euro 2000, somebody from the FA actually rang me up and asked for the Racing Post to be faxed over to them while they were in, was it Belgium at the time, Euro 2000, because the players were bored and there was a bit of a school going on in terms of the gambling there. And I mistakenly, instead of sending it to Kevin Keegan, I sent it to Kevin Pillane. I faxed over the whole Racing Post to him rather than to Kevin Keegan. But I think that really the England team can get distracted if they're away for too long.
You see, the problem with that is that obviously in my day we would just sneak out and go to the pub and get pissed. So we would need to stay in and be cocooned in, because we found lots of alternative ways of trying to go missing. which is quite entertaining. Whereas I suppose now football has changed. You really are just cocooned, because we would walk out in Sardinia and he'd let you go out. Of course, he didn't want you to go to the pub, but he'd let you walk out. You know, we weren't cocooned in. So when you are cocooned in, I suppose you can get a bit stir crazy and you do need some kind to alleviate it. So, you know, rating post is a good one.
I used to fax the runners to a manager when I was at the bookmakers. That used to be my job. God forbid I got it wrong. Anywhere else in Group E we should be taking note of bets-wise?
I think Switzerland will go through with France. I'm a bit worried about the fact they've got to go to Manaus, which I don't think will suit the European teams. But this is a young side that is definitely improving. There's no doubt about that. Ecuador, not very good outside of Quito, and Honduras, I expect them to finish last.
The stats.
Yeah,
should we be with France or against France? Because plenty of people are against them.
I think with him. I think Reeby's going to be a bigger miss, assuming he's injured, than people think. He scored 5 and assisted 6 in 10 games in qualifying. You know, it's pretty key. A lot of people forget as well that France aren't the seeded team in this group. Switzerland are, and you know, Switzerland are pretty good. They're very good defensively. They've only lost 4 competitive games since 2008. And they always come up with some weird thing at the World Cup. Like in 2006, they didn't concede a goal but went out. They managed to not score in a penalty shootout at that time. I mean, last time out, they beat Spain in the opening game. So Switzerland are kind of a bit of a random entity. You know? So I think they've got a chance of even winning the group.
Interesting. Group F. Mark, you sent a tweet out the other day that said, was it journalists who were making picks?
It was odds compilers. We asked 8 odds compilers who would win the World Cup from all the major bookmakers, and 7 of them come back and said Argentina, and 1 said Brazil. I was absolutely amazed that there was such a general consensus that Argentina would win the World Cup. I knew they'd be well fancied, but I didn't realise to such an extent that, you know, if you asked 8 random people who would win the World Cup, I don't think you'd necessarily get 7 saying Argentina. So I think that so many of the leading odds compilers do fancy Argentina. It's almost a tip within itself.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, Messi, Aguero, Higuain would be the obvious place to start with that, but I think there's more to Argentina than just their attack. I mean, you look at Di Maria, was the best player in the Champions League final, against Atletico. Mascherano, I think he's better suited to the holding midfield role than the centre back at Barcelona. And even defensively, everybody says how useless they are at the back, but this is a team that's got Zabaleta. How many better right backs are there than Zabaleta in Europe? There's not many. Garay won the treble with Benfica. Demichelis won a Premier League with Manchester City. You look at there's some decent players there. The other centre-back, Fernandes, plays for Napoli. Romero's the goalkeeper that I would be slightly concerned about because he hasn't played for Monaco this season. But there's only one reason why he went to Monaco, and it wasn't for game time. He was happy to take the money and just be a reserve goalkeeper. He's got the trust of the manager. 8 of the starting 11 that will start the opening game, that was the team that won the Olympics in Beijing, and I think they've grown up together. Messi and Aguero are very close friends. You were talking earlier about the harmony. There is a real chemistry between those two, particularly. They room together, they get on together, and I just really like the balance of Argentina. Do
you agree with that, John? I mean,
yes.
It sounded like you favoured Brazil over Argentina.
Yeah, but Argentina would be my second favourites. So, the fact that if you asked me who would win, I said Brazil, doesn't write off Argentina at all. They're a very strong side. Although Manchester City won the league despite Demichelis, obviously.
That is not fair towards the end.
No, I'm only joking. Edit that bit. Argentina are my second favourites. So when you ask who's going to win, and they're strong, they're well balanced. Mascherano is a fantastic holding midfield player. And with the front three with Messi and Aguero, and Di Maria, as he said, was sensational throughout the whole. I did the Champions League in South Africa. Throughout the whole Champions League, he was Real Madrid's most impressive player as far as I was concerned. So yes, attacking-wise, yes, they do. But I still feel defensively, yes, they're good enough to go through the group, good enough to get to the semi-finals, even the final. But I just feel that, defensively, they will fall short at the possibly at the final hurdle. But if I had to say a second favourite for me, it would be Argentina.
But how big a fact will it be that everywhere they go, we talked about Diego Costa getting some stick, they're going to be the one team that Brazil and the Brazilian public will not want to win? How difficult will that make life for them?
Well, they will have a lot of fans when they play, because the Brazilians aren't going to watch Argentina versus Bosnia and boo Argentina, because they're not going to get many Brazilians there. I wouldn't have thought. It's going to be full of Argentinians.
Keep them awake at night instead.
So but they'll only upset England, won't upset them. until they actually play Brazil. If they have to play Brazil, then that could be a factor. But I don't think in the World Cup it will necessarily, because they know they're going to get it when they're on the buses or whatever. But in the stadiums, they will be full of Argentinians supporting them, and whoever they play against, obviously the opposition will be there. So I don't think that will play a major factor in it, because the Brazilian public have no control over Argentina's performances. So, you know, and they're experienced enough, they're good enough, they've got the quality, so they will go a very, very long way in the competition.
Could you see them, Mark? Could you see them starting as they have in previous campaigns, like a house on fire, and probably trading as favourites early on in this?
I do think they'll win the group with 9 points, and then you will see a wave of support for them. It's happened in previous World Cups, and then they've gone out in the quarter-final stage. This time around, the draw it's a dream draw, probably to the semi-finals, because even in the last 16, it looks like that they should meet Switzerland in the last 16, and if the market's right, it'll be Belgium in the quarter-finals. I mean, there's nobody else that's got an easier path to the semi-finals. They don't have to go to the north of Brazil once during the whole tournament, so everything that they'll do will be in sort of the cooler climates. They've got less miles to travel. They've just been given the absolute perfect draw. I can't think of a reason sort of outside of maybe the goalkeeper as to why that they should
Duncan,
win.
give me a reason then to oppose Argentina.
They've only won one knockout match in 90 minutes since 1990. So, I mean, as Mark said, they've gone out in the quarter-final 3 of the last 4 times, but A, this is a very different Argentina team, and B, you know, they've got semi-home advantage. They're going to be in the south of Brazil most of the time. You know, they were the best qualifiers in the South American section with 32 points, 35 goals. They just look really strong, really.
You need to remember, they got to the quarterfinals 4 years ago and had Maradona as their manager. Yeah. I mean, for anybody that sort of follows racing, I mean, that is carrying overweight and then some, isn't it? To have him as your manager and still reach the quarterfinals.
There's a bet in this paper from you in this group, isn't there? It's one you fancy.
Yeah, Iran to score under 2.5 goals. I think they'll be lucky to have 2.5 passes against Argentina, and then Bosnia and Nigeria, even if they score 1 goal against each of those two, your bet will collect. So I think that is probably my most solid wager of the whole tournament.
What are the odds?
It's 4-6, but it's a 4-6 that should win.
Buying money, potentially. Group G, a couple more groups to do. John, in a word, might need 2. Who's the best player in the world?
Messi for me, but Ronaldo this year. I prefer Messi as a player. Obviously, he's had his injuries this year, but this year Ronaldo's been sensational. He has been far and away the best player, and it shows how well Messi has done in previous years, because Ronaldo's been sensational in previous years, but Messi has just eclipsed him. But Ronaldo for me this year has been fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Although for Portugal, and yes, he did score the hat-trick, and he has catapulted them single-handedly to the World Cup. However, in World Cups gone by, Portugal always a bit like France. For me, they're the underachievers. Individually, look at the players they have. They should be getting to the semi-finals of every tournament they play, because they've got good players all over. And I expect them to go through in this group with Germany. Ghana,
Have they got those good? I mean, I did the game on Sky against Sweden in the playoff, and it was just a one-man show. The rest of the team...
No, they're decent players. I mean, Nani does so well for Portugal as opposed to Manchester United, but I like Portugal. Individually, I think that they've got, I mean, you've got Contrao, you've got Pepe, as much as we may not like him, they're a very, very competent team. But they just seem to implode for some reason at the final hurdle or close down. But in this group, it's a fairly straightforward group. Ghana, for me, USA on the team they were very much like Australia, whereby they could take a point or beat somebody to make somebody else go through or go through themselves. Whereas the USA, they also struggled in the CONCACAF to qualify. They didn't qualify very easily, although them and Mexico normally do. So Germany, for me, is the best team in the group, and Portugal I think will go through alongside it.
Mark, best bets for Group G?
I think the best bet is USA to finish bottom. Germany and Portugal look to be the 2 strongest, and I think that Ghana will beat USA in that opening game. USA's squad doesn't look very good this time around. I'm not entirely convinced by Klinsmann as a manager either. He really did flop at Bayern Munich. When he was the Germany coach, everybody said that, you know, the brains behind it was Jogi Löw, who's now, of course, the manager. I think not taking Landon Donovan's a big mistake. There's obviously some sort of personality issues there. Altidor's coming off a terrible season. Clint Dempsey didn't look very good when he was at Fulham. I don't really see it coming together for the US. I mean, the news today about Ronaldo and his knee is concerning me with Portugal, because when I initially wrote the preview in this Racing Post, I did tip Portugal to win it as my second selection. I took it out because of the news on Ronaldo, and if Ronaldo's not 100%, they can't possibly win it. if he is 100%, I still think that there's a chance, but unless he's playing on top of his form, Portugal can't win without him. Germany, I think they've had their chances, and they've come up short in recent tournaments. And I don't like to use that solely as an argument, because people used that against Spain, didn't they? And then that they won the Euros and it really did kick them on. But Germany were beaten fair and square by Italy 2 years ago in the European Championship. So they're the shortest price European team in the whole tournament. But I'm not so sure that that's right. Really.
I just think defensively Germany aren't strong enough.
Okay.
We saw them in the World Cup and they've got good attacking players, and you've got Ozil, you've got all these fantastic players. But defensively, and very much like Dimarcatis, as much as we don't want to talk about before we're in an area where I'm sure you've got lots of Arsenal supporters, Mertesacker for me is a problem. Particularly in international football, whereby you're going to play against quick strikers, teams who have possession. And we can see at Arsenal, yes, he's decent on the ball and he's a good organiser, but I think in international football you need pace to be a top defender. And I think that defensively, and we saw Boateng as well at the back for Bayern Munich, you saw the problems they have. Fullbacks, okay, Philipp Lahm, but down in the middle, through the middle, those two central defenders at Germany, even if Badstuber or Hummels plays, he's not particularly quick. So while they will play well, as we saw until the quarterfinals, semi-finals, I think defensively they're not good enough to keep the top teams out. So yes, I expect Germany to go through, get to the quarterfinals, maybe even the semi-final, but I think that's as much as they can hope for.
Are Opta saying opposed Germany? Chance gone?
A little bit. I mean, they've obviously got a very good workout record. They've obviously got 100% penalty success, shootout success record, as we all know. But I mean, like John said earlier on, that they looked a bit leggy against Cameroon the other night. They've got to play all three of their games in the northeast, which is going to be really tough. They've got the pedigree, but whether they've got the actual...
It sounds like from where they're playing, they're a team to oppose.
Yeah, I would.
I think if there's to be how on earth did they go out at the first round? It wouldn't surprise me if Germany went early. I just think that there's been rumours of unrest in the camp between the Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund lot. They've had a lot of injuries as well, and it's not a simple group. I don't think it's a simple group.
They also don't have a very a key striker, so they try and play a false nine, but then that never works. And then they've got a collection of very good players. They don't necessarily look like they're gelling perfectly at the moment.
What about Belgium, who for a while were very fashionable to tip, Mark? Yeah, the price now is short enough, is it?
Yeah, well, early on they were 500 to 1. 4 years ago you could have got 500 to 1 on Belgium to win it. If you've got that, then you're onto a great bet. If you take the 20 to 1 now, I think that they say if you missed a wedding, don't go to the funeral, and I think that's what you'll be doing if you back Belgium at 20 to 1. You've missed the happy days. Don't go in for the sad ones. I think that they'll probably get out of the group. They've got a very good goalkeeper in Courtois. They've got a lot of good Premier League players, but how many outstanding Premier League players have they got? Hazard, Lukaku is somebody that could train on, but I still think he's quite raw, really. Sometimes I see him, his second touch is a header, and he's not the finished article. He's not Messi or Higuain or Aguero or anything like that. You look at their midfield and you say, Dembele and Chadli, and they're okay, but I don't think they're going to win you a World Cup. It's a very easy group, so they should get out of that. But I think in the last 16, that's where the dream dies for those that are on at 500 to 1.
Shame.
Yeah.
John, Group H?
No, I think Belgium will go through. I think they're a good side, and they've got good individual players. You've got Hazard.
A good side, but not a great side.
I think it could be a great side. I mean, you look at the boy Morelos, you could look at Hazard. I mean, Lukaku up front, Company, Vertonghen, Vermaelen, Courtois, good goalkeeper. You've got the holding midfield player who plays for Zenit St. Petersburg. What's his name?
Witsel.
They are a good side, but I just think experience counts against them. They haven't got that much experience at the highest level playing in these tournaments. I think very much like England in the Euros in the next 2 years after growing together, and the next World Cup, I think we can see them because some of them are fairly young. And the group is fairly straightforward. I think themselves and Russia will go through. And of course, then getting into the I think they could get to the quarterfinals depending on who they can actually draw. But I like them individually, player for player. But experience counts for so much. And I'm not talking about experience, even necessarily from an individual playing perspective, from the country's perspective in terms of doing things. Yes, 86 they got to the semi-final, but apart from then, they haven't really done much in the World Cup. But I think this is a team in progress who, in the next 2 years, we can see if they stay together, can be very strong. Fairly straightforward group. They'll go through the group, I think, with Russia. And then, quarterfinals, maybe even semi-finals.
I imagine the stats, though, when Belgium give them absolutely no chance, though. In terms of tournaments.
Historically, I mean, they think they've drawn 5 and won one of their last 6 games at the World Cup. They draw a lot of games. they're very good. I think Courtois could potentially be one of the stars of the World Cup. They're very good defensively. They only scored more than once in the whole of the qualifying. They don't, for a team with such a collection of attacking players, they don't really cut loose that often. It'd be fine for this group. They'll definitely get through the group, but I think latter stages, that's when it's going to count. And like John said, the lack of experience as well.
Those are the groups. Mark, let's go for a top goal scorer in the tournament.
I'll put all of my eggs in the Argentina basket and go for Higuain. I think Argentina should score a lot of goals in that group with Bosnia, Iran and also Nigeria. So that's where you get your goals, I think. So Messi's the obvious place to look, but I think he's short enough, I think, in the betting. Aguero just picks up one or too many niggles for me to be considered sort of somebody that's going to play 6 or 7 games at a World Cup in a short period of time. Higuain scored a lot of goals for Napoli this season. I think he's a very consistent forward, and I think that he could sort of get 4 or 5, and that could take him very close.
Anyone at a massive price?
If there's to be one at a massive price, Dermot, who plays for Switzerland, you have a look at his Bundesliga record, only 2 players, Mandzukic and Lewandowski, scored more goals than him in the Bundesliga this season, and he played for a team that got relegated. So, that's pretty strong going. He's about to move to Leverkusen. He's a young forward. He's been scoring in the recent friendlies. He's just got into this Swiss team. I'm not sure he can actually win the Golden Boot or the top goal scorer, but he could fill a place at a really big price.
John, anyone stand out as top goal scorer?
Well, first of all, you have to think about someone who you think is going to get to at least the semi-finals. Because no matter how many goals you score, if you get knocked out in the first round, unless when these Russians scored 5 goals in one game a few years ago, then unfortunately you're not going to do it. So Higuain could be a possibility. However, is he going to play every game? We don't know, because Aguero may play, Messi may play. He may not even play that much, Higuain. So I would go with Messi. I would normally go with Ronaldo, but once again, if you could say Portugal will get to the semi-finals, then you could see Ronaldo scoring a lot of goals. But if they don't get to the semi-finals, will he score enough goals up until the quarterfinals to then say he can be? Whereas I think Argentina would at least go to the semi-finals. And the way they will play, as much as, I'm not talking about a good price, but I think Messi. Neymar, yes, I don't see him as an out-and-out goal scorer, so he could be maybe even the player of the tournament if Brazil want to win it because of the way he plays, but I don't think he'll be the top scorer. So I will go with Messi.
Some quick fire questions from Mark, because time's beating us for Soccer Base. Best of the special markets.
Well, the Iran to score under 2.5 goals would definitely be one of those. If you're looking for a real big price, Thiago Silva to win player of the tournament, I think that being the Brazilian captain and 66 to 1, if they do win it, it will be because
It's like being a quarterback in the Super Bowl.
He's exactly. You're looking at I would say he could end up being somebody that Brazil pin their hopes on defensively, to get them through to the final. And it's been a market really where there's been a lot of shock winners. Oliver Kahn won it in 2002. Diego Forlan was 150 to 1 4 years ago. So I think Thiago Silva's an interesting one because he'll become like an iconic figure, being the Brazilian captain on home soil if they go all the way.
And after what you did 4 years ago, I've got to ask you, name the finalists.
I'm going for Argentina. I think that they're absolute certainties for the semi-finals, and I think they can definitely get to the final. I'm going to go for France, a bigger price. I know that Brazil-Argentina is 10 to 1, and if they both win their groups, then they will avoid each other to the final. And I'd rather be a backer than a layer of that, actually, because I do think that that they've got potential to go a long way. But at a much bigger price, I'll give France a chance.
So just to finish with, then, let's get from the 3 of you. Who's going to win the World Cup? Duncan, you go first.
Argentina.
Confident in Argentina. John? Brazil, and you're going to say?
Argentina for me, yeah.
And that finishes this section. So if you've been watching on soccerbase.com, thank you very much for watching. We look forward to your company next time. For the rest of us here...